In our Creating a Training Program series, we've discussed setting up a training session and a training week in general. But how do you pick specific exercises? Should you back squat, front squat, split squat, box squat, push a sled, or use the leg press? What goes into deciding what exercises to use? The purpose of this video is to give you a few questions to ask and a process to go through when picking exercises. There isn't a one best exercise for every athlete and every situation, but by examining a few factors together, then you can pick exercises that are most likely to suit that particular athlete. We will start by discussing general training modalities and then discuss some additional questions when choosing more sport-specific exercises and when it's appropriate to do those. The first question you need to ask is, what are the 3 to 4 exercises people have always used to develop a certain movement pattern? While there may be a reason to not do a traditional exercise, you should probably have a reason other than, I saw this cool thing on Instagram. For example, to develop leg strength, one might pick the back squat, front squat, Bulgarian split squat, or a box squat variation. I'm not saying that these are the only exercises that you should do or that an athlete's ever going to need. But without due cause to use something else, start here. And there are similar exercises for every movement pattern, be it a more traditional squat or bench variation, or even exercises to improve rotational power or across different planes of movement. Next, you want to consider, especially if deviating from a traditional movement, the ability to overload. The weight room is not about who can do the coolest tricks. We are trying to improve an athlete's ability to produce force. See our video on the science behind strength and conditioning in the card above that discusses why the weight room needs to stay more general. If the exercise doesn't lend itself to being overloaded for long periods of time, it likely isn't a good option. We want stable, compound exercises, which is especially true for beginner athletes and those who haven't built a solid level of general strength yet. An overlooked question for individual athletes is, what do they like to do and what feels best? Consistency and effort will beat out a magic exercise every time. If the back squat hurts the athlete's knees, but split squats don't, do split squats. Now, we do want to work on what's causing the pain, but while that's happening, find movements the athlete can perform and overload well. I'm currently working with a 6'4" 8th grader who has grown like a foot in 2 years. He was getting knee pain from trying to back squat, but split squats felt fine, so we're using split squats. These examples come up often. Don't let it sidetrack the main goal because you're attached to a specific exercise. Along the same lines, strength coaches hate when athletes and parents have quote-unquote illogical fears, like baseball players bench pressing. We all want to seem smart and explain why really that actually isn't an issue. The thing is, who the heck cares? There is no bench press on the baseball diamond. If they feel comfortable doing dumbbell bench press or weighted push-ups, use those and progress them forward. How much time does the athlete have to learn an exercise, and what is their ability to do so? Cleans are a fantastic lift, but if you need to get someone ready in 3 months, there are likely better options to start seeing results. An athlete with years to improve and some dedication might be perfect to start learning some of those more complex lifts. This really spills over into team settings too. If 80% of your team can't balance for a split squat, then maybe pick something that they can do and build some confidence with. Getting the athlete to feel confident and see results is what keeps them coming back. Then they can progress to more as their body adapts. Another big one for team settings is equipment, space, and time. Don't do box squats if you have 40 kids in a weight room with 5 squat racks and 2 boxes. Setting up bands on your squats might not be appropriate for a 45-minute session. Use what is best available, train hard, and be consistent. Before moving on to specific sport exercises and aligning with rotating a current exercise, ask the question, is what you're doing still working? If the athlete is making great progress and nothing hurts, don't change anything. If progress has stalled, they might need a new exercise to give a new stimulus. A few more questions arise when deciding what sport-specific movements to do. The first thing to examine is the sport open or closed skilled? Open skill sports require athletes to experience a nearly infinite array of movements, speeds, forces, and energy demands. Think wrestling, football, basketball, and really most field and court sports. There's no specific leg exercise for a wrestler because they're going to end up in any number of positions. For these athletes, you really need to stick to general training modalities. They need to have generally strong legs, backs, good speed, change of direction ability, and flexibility. There is no such thing as a specific sport overloading exercise. Now, you can train more or less in certain planes of motion or qualities, etc. Like, you can understand that sprinting speed is more important to a wide receiver than their bench press numbers. That is where sport examination comes into play when determining more specific programming. Wrestlers, for example, don't run, so they don't need a ton of sprint work, but more explosive acceleration or plyometric exercises would be a better choice to develop speed and power. An offensive lineman in football needs more overload with horizontal pushing. A barbell bench press variation is more likely where someone like a soccer player can easily get away with dumbbell bench for really their whole career. I don't mean to put every example possible here, but you can kind of see while the training is general in nature as far as the exercises go, there are going to be specific areas of that general training that need more focus depending on the sport and position. For closed, skilled sports, specific exercises definitely exist. These are sports that have a very few different movements and are often repetitive. Think throwing the javelin, swimming, pole vaulting, etc. These sports have a very limited array of movements and sport demands. So general strength isn't as important as being able to execute a very specific movement pattern. We can take time to overload smaller pieces of that movement to help the athlete improve in more specific positions for their sport. However, we don't want to get carried away. There are still general levels of strength that need reached before more specific exercises matter. A good example is in the pole vault. There are plenty of exercises that overload portions of the vaulting technique or mimic it in some close proximity. However, if the athlete can't do a pull-up, they just need to get generally stronger. Through a quick Google search, you can find a solid range of general strength standards for many different sports. A coach might argue that starting to do more specific pole vaulting exercises, you need to do 10 pull-ups, and another coach 15. But it's unlikely that they're going to say that number is 0. The reason for needing some general strength is so the athlete is strong enough to actually hold position. They can theoretically understand exactly where their body needs to be for, say, a pole vaulting technique, but if they can't actually get into that position, they're just going to ingrain poor technical patterns into their body. Once they can actually hold that position, then overloading it more specifically might make sense. The point here is training happens in stages. If you can't do a push-up, there is no specific exercise that's going to help you. There are some general physical requirements that you should probably be able to do. It doesn't matter how good your tackling technique is. If you weigh 160 pounds and squat 155, you aren't tackling Saquon Barkley. Focus on building athletes in the basic general training methods that millions of athletes and coaches have used to get better. In more general, open skilled sports, stick mostly with those kinds of exercises, improving the programming to match their current level and sport. For sports with more close-ended skills, specific overloading movements that might look ridiculous to any other sport might need done. However, those specific moves will only be effective if they have enough general strength and coordination to hold proper position. When in doubt, fall back on what has worked for every athlete in history. There isn't a magic exercise, and you don't need anxiety over choosing between 100 different variations. Pick something the athlete can execute well, overload, and have them get good at it. Strength conditioning is general training. The more minute details of technique and specific movements should really be reserved for their sporting technique. Make sure to check out our Creating a Program series where we will answer all manner of questions around building a good training program. Like this video and please subscribe to the Immortal Power channel.